I want to get to CNN anchor Kaitlan Collins in New York. Kaitlan, you have some exclusive reaction from the former president and Biden's rival in this race, Donald Trump.
Yeah, Alex, I spoke with former President Trump minutes after President Biden tweeted that he is that he is exiting the 2024 race. Obviously, this has been something that the Trump team has been singularly focused on over the last week as those calls for Biden to get out of the race did not dissipate. I was told he was tracking this even from the Republican convention while he was focusing on who was speaking when, his own speech that last Thursday night. He was still tracking these efforts, Alex, and he told me in a quote, and I'm quoting the former president now, he said, referencing Biden, "He is the worst president in the history of our country. He goes down as the single worst president by far in the history of our country." But what I pressed him on, Alex, and obviously what's important here is what this means for him and for his campaign. He told me that he believes that Vice President Harris will be easier to beat than Joe Biden would have been. Obviously, we don't know that she is going to be the nominee. Obviously, Biden has endorsed her, but there is a real question among Democrats over what that's going to look like. And also, I should note that Trump's team has been so worried about this exact situation. They wanted President Biden to stay in this race because they looked at the numbers that we were all looking at, that Democrats were all looking at, and they thought that essentially that he would fare better against President Biden in this race, given that debate performance, given what this looks like. This does, as Jeff said, inject a huge amount of uncertainty in this race. We don't know what it means. It's not clear what it means for the Trump team. They are going to be looking at this closely and following that as well. But it is a notable response from Donald Trump, who now has a big question of who it is he's going to be challenging for the presidency come November.
And Kaitlan, game this out for us in terms of what we could expect to see in the coming hours, in terms of responses from those party elders, in terms of the boost in fundraising that Bakari was just talking about, and what the campaign trail is going to be looking like in those next few weeks heading up to the DNC.
I mean, to be frank, we have no idea. The DNC is going to be held 1 month from today. Democrats will be gathering in Chicago, and it's an open question. We've seen Politico reporting Friday night that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, has endorsed this idea privately of an open convention, should that be the case. Now, we don't know if that's actually what we'll see. This is notable when it comes to donors, though, because we had been hearing a lot of reporting from donors who were telling the Biden campaign that they were not going to be offering more money or helping fundraise more money for the Biden campaign until this very situation was figured out, whether or not President Biden was ultimately going to drop out of the race and who would replace him in that situation. And so now that this has happened, I think that it's a big question for donors. I think it's going to be a big question now that Biden has endorsed Harris as the nominee, if that actually happens, who she would pick to be on the ticket with her. I mean, we just finished the vice presidency nomination race with Donald Trump, and now it is an open question of, if it is Harris on the ticket, who she selects to be her vice president and what that would look like. That was also a factor in Donald Trump's selection of his VP. He was kind of watching that closely to see what was going to happen with the Democratic ticket. They wanted to have a good idea of who they would be up against. And now that has completely changed, even though J.D. Vance is now formally his running mate. And so, I mean, this is just a huge mountain of uncertainty for everyone, I think. A question of what this looks like going forward. And if the party does line up behind what President Biden did today by endorsing Harris as the nominee going forward. Clearly, I mean, I think a lot of people didn't believe there was any other option for that because he picked her to be his vice president. So it would be incredibly unusual if he didn't select her to endorse her as the next nominee after he got out of the race. But obviously, you know, this is uncharted territory for anyone, much less the White House. And so it is a major question of what these next few weeks looks like. But it's safe to say this race has completely altered itself since that CNN debate in Atlanta a little over 3 weeks ago. The entire game has changed, Alex.
Yeah, it certainly was the assumption that if he were to step out, he were to drop out of this race, that he would hand things over to Kamala Harris. But it is not, as we've just been discussing, a foregone conclusion that she is necessarily the nominee. That is one of the biggest questions, if not the biggest right now. I want to get back to Priscilla Alvarez, who is traveling with the president. Priscilla, what more are you learning from the White House just moments after the president made this historic announcement?
Well, we're learning a little bit more about what happened in the minutes before the president put out this letter. Sources telling our colleague MJ Lee that the president informed senior campaign and White House team about his decision before the letter went out, saying that he had been reflecting over the last couple days. And of course, this decision was being very closely held. Of course, what the president was doing over the last couple days, in addition to deliberating, was that he was self-isolating. He was diagnosed with COVID earlier last week, and he immediately came here to his residence in Delaware. He got here on Wednesday, has since been behind closed doors, self-isolating. As his doctor had said, his symptoms were improving. And over that time, we are now getting a better picture of what was happening. He was listening to those around him. He was reflecting on what the next steps were, and clearly came to this decision to not seek re-election. And it was in the minutes, again, before putting out this letter that he had notified his senior campaign and White House team. Now, of course, the president, in addition to putting out this letter, has provided his endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris, essentially urging Democrats to get in line behind her. We should note that the vice president this upcoming week had travel plans to go to Milwaukee for events, another sort of attempt at following the Republican National Convention there to provide her counter-programming. The vice president, of course, has spent a lot of the time on the campaign trail really focused on reproductive rights. That has been a line of attack consistently against Republicans, and an assignment that was provided by the campaign fairly early on. Already in January was she out there talking about one of the most galvanizing issues for Democrats and this campaign. So I think you've heard now from everyone that there are so many questions about what happens next. There's so much uncertainty, but the president at least offering a little bit of a notification and some behind the scenes here in terms of how he had been reflecting over the last few days to his senior team. And now we are also getting a deluge of reactions from his allies supporting this decision and moving forward with the party. So again, just to reiterate here, it has now been 24 days from that June debate. 24 days out, this is where we are now. The president deciding not to seek re-election, notifying his senior team only moments before putting out this letter for the entire public to see.
All right, Priscilla, stay with us. Jeff Zeleny, back to you. When do you think we can expect to hear from Kamala Harris? And then the biggest question to her, I think, is going to be, who is her running mate?
That is the central question now. And again, this is not, even though this news is a bit of a shock, the timing of it this afternoon, there have been quiet discussions that have been growing louder over the last 3 weeks. What would she do if? So certainly there are some top potential candidates. She will have the ability to choose her own running mate should she become the nominee. But I'm told just by all our reporting in these last few weeks that she's not likely to wait until she's formally nominated. She is moving forward with this. So the Democratic governors are certainly those who come to mind. Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is such a key state, of course, in all of this. She was down in North Carolina just last week campaigning with their governor, Roy Cooper, who is term limited and he is leaving office. Of course, other governors as well. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. So it would be hard to imagine that governors would not be at the top of the list or the only list here going forward. But just speaking to another Democratic advisor, as you were on the in the interview with Kaitlan there, this senior Democratic official says that people will unite behind Harris, who would run against her. So we will see. This is unfolding on a Sunday. Some people are just getting this information, but it is unlikely that a governor would not be at the center of this list.
To add to your list, Brashear from Kentucky is someone who's been named a lot. Gavin Newsom from California.
Unlikely Gavin Newsom, because he would have the same constitutional issues being a resident of California. And Andy Beshear, absolutely. Some Democrats believe that he would be a good messaging thing. It's going to be who she is comfortable with, but also this is a dramatically different race going forward. It's a tougher race for Democrats. The battleground is already expanding more. So someone from the blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, we shouldn't rule out the possibility of Gretchen Whitmer. That would be certainly history making of its own, 2 women on the ticket. But look, this is someone that is going to be Vice President Harris. Should she become the nominee, this is going to be her first and biggest choice.